Hey folks, it's Nate bringing you another Iron Age comic review, and today I'm taking a look at Cerberus by Narwhal. As always, when I discuss Narwhal's work, be aware that I work with Narwhal. I consider him a friend of mine, and that does probably color my reviews in some ways. I think I have always tried to give fair and constructive criticism to everyone I've reviewed here. So I'm certainly not going to go easy on this book just because it's from somebody I know, but it is a bias that's important to point out before we get too far into it. So let's talk about Cerberus. This is I think 98, maybe 196 to 108 page book that has a pretty simple but very interesting mystery story in it. And I don't say simple as a bad thing. I think that in the modern era, we see very complicated things as somehow better, but often they're very fragile and they don't hold up under heavy use. This is a story that you can go through a couple of times, maybe many times, and it will still stand up to scrutiny, which I really like to see. And you know, there's a charm to this that is very unique in the independent comics that I've backed. So, as always, I'm going to give you my review of this, and then I'm going to warn you that my review is done. I'll give you a recommendation, and then I'm going to go into the serious critique. There's not going to be a whole lot of that in this one, no small part because this is part one of two. But before I get into the critique, I will give you a warning because I don't worry about spoilers during that part of the discussion. So if you do want to check this story out and you don't want it spoiled, go ahead and stop there, duck out, maybe come back after you've read it yourself. What is this book? Well, physically, it's a really nice, perfect bound book. As I've said before when I reviewed Narwhal's products, it has an excellent cover. It has a nice interior. It doesn't have super glossy pages. Longtime viewers know I hate super glossy pages. I think they detract from the reading experience because you'll try and hold it open, like read it, and all you're seeing is glare coming at you. You have to tilt it back and forth. Not a fan of that. Maybe if it was an actual magazine, which you could lay flat on a table, I wouldn't have those angles that tend to kick a lot of glare up. That wouldn't be as big an issue. But in a book like this, I like a nice, fairly matte page, and that's what this is. There's a little bit of shine there, just enough to give you a good reading experience, but it doesn't get in the way. This is a really great point. The paper is a good quality as well, so nothing to complain about physically about the book. I really think that at this point, a lot of independent comic creators have found that really good quality point, and we're not having as many production issues as we saw maybe 5 years ago when things were a little more up in the air, and there seemed to be not as much of a window between a really poor quality newsprint book, which can be enticing at the right price point, but won't hold up to a lot of reading, and then at the other end of the spectrum, a really high quality, large hardbound book, which can also be really nice and appealing, but can be priced at a point where it can be hard for everyone who's interested in the story to pick it up. This is at that perfect price point and quality point where you're like, okay, this is $20. I can drop that and get a decent story that I will enjoy over and over again, and it will hold up to it both physically and, as we'll see when we discuss story, intellectually. So the art in here is actually not by Narwhal. Who's his artist? Monica Magan. I don't know how to pronounce that. I apologize. So this is outside of the Narwhal Shorts Compendium, the first time we've seen someone else illustrating Narwhal's story, and this is a much longer story than anything in that. And Monica did a great job with this. It looks very appealing. The art is very serviceable. Like, here's the first couple of pages. This really isn't anything you couldn't see from the Kickstarter anyway. But it looks great. It's very appealing. There's kind of this muted color palette to it, which I think is actually very appropriate. We'll talk about that more in the future. Colors are by Narwhal and Jared Jewell. Again, I'm not familiar with Jared, but these are very nice colors. They do their job. They tell the story. They don't get in the way. And again, they have that muted color palette. This is a murder mystery, almost a noir story. So I find that pretty fitting. If this was something else, if this was something like Earthbound or even Even if this was a colored version of, say, Foreign Agent, this color palette may not be entirely appropriate. Something a little brighter might fit the story better. But this is a noir murder mystery, at least to an extent, genre-wise. And I find it very fitting in this. And it's not like all the pages are dark. That opening kind of takes place at a funeral in the evening and at night. We have some brighter pictures, like this one at the Chinese restaurant, that are much easier to see and understand. And they don't have that layer of noir shadow. There are a couple of other moments here where the mood lightens, but really the colors in this book are affected heavily by the mood, which is appropriate in a visual medium like this. So all in all, great artwork. Monica did a great job on this. I understand that Monica also worked on, what was it? Monster MD by Von Kloss. So you can also see some art there. But yeah, I really don't have a whole lot of critique to offer here. It is more of a cartoony style, and that is something you should be aware of. This is a talking animal book. I guess we should get that out of the way. You couldn't tell by the cover, which is all animals. It's a talking animal book, and it's appropriate for a talking animal book. It's very pleasing to the eye. The animals look cute, and they're not so realistic that they don't emote. They have actual human expressions, so that kind of helps you connect to the animals. I'm not much of an animal psychologist. I'm not a veterinarian, so I don't know, how much of the animal body language you see in here is authentic. But it looks very believable. I never thought I was looking at a human looking at me through an animal mask, for example, as I was reading this. So good job. Very, very pleasing. Very nice. Let's talk a little bit about the story in general terms. This is a murder mystery. Lee Button is the dog right here. He's our protagonist. His owner was murdered by another dog, and Lee has to try and track down the owner, or not the owner, the owner of the dog that murdered his owner, I suppose, but also the dog. He's kind of on a vendetta. He also wants to know what happened to his owner's mate, who's also not murdered, but missing. He doesn't really understand how that happened, and we get some glimpses of the investigation into his owner's murder from the human side, and we learn there's kind of a serial killer, it looks like, going around sicking a dog on people, get them killed. So there's that aspect as well, although Lee is not really aware of that. We as the readers are, because we see a lot of the detective's investigation. This fellow here, who I've been calling Gordon, is, for obvious reasons, is the FBI guy in charge of the investigation. And they have a local cop there as well. The human dynamic is interesting. There's certainly nothing bad about it, but it's very much in the background. Lee is a very dedicated and determined protagonist, as he should be. He's a very good boy, German Shepherd. I don't know a whole lot about the temperaments of different breeds of dogs. So I don't know if Lee's depiction here is in keeping with that particular breed, but he certainly matches the kind of stereotype of the loyal dog, the very determined dog who sets out and does things for his master because he's very loyal to his human. And I have no problem with that. He's a very charming and engaging protagonist. There's a really great moment in here where he goes back to his mother to visit before he goes and digs really deep into his investigation. You can tell he's kind of saying a part of his life is over, and he's kind of closing that up. And before he does, he goes back home. And his mom actually says as he's leaving, she's worried that he thinks he's never going to come back to visit again. Very possible, because clearly Lee's owner was killed by a very vicious dog. And Lee is, he's not a particularly wimpy dog, but he is a very civilized dog. He's been, owned by humans for most of his life, it sounds like. He can scavenge, he can, knock over trash cans and things like that. He has a lot of interesting connections to other woodland creatures that give him resources. Not very savage, and clearly this other dog is. So that's going to be a real obstacle for him. The investigation itself is very engaging. It's very logical, and I don't mean in the Sherlock Holmes sense that Lee sits around and he goes through a bunch of logic problems, but there is a very clear connection between events, between clues, and between things Lee is told that you can follow very easily. That's what I mean when I say this holds up pretty well to scrutiny. Again, I usually read these twice. And when I went through this the second time, I paid special attention to all of the connecting tissue. And I found it very strong. There are a lot of murder mysteries where the detective just runs from one thing to another, and the story moves so fast you don't really pick up on the gaps and the leaps of logic that are being made. But in this, they're pretty clear. In no small part because of this owl. This owl gives Lee several clues in the form of a riddle. This will explain things clearer if he gets paid in food, which is the currency among all the woodland creatures. And I really liked that. I liked that not everyone was just falling all over themselves to help Lee. I liked that they were looking to get food, which is a very basic animal concern. And I liked Lillian the Owl a whole lot. Actually, I thought he was a nice addition to the story, and his more mercenary attitude fits him in many ways. The owl can't fly; he's old, fat, and he has this possum and bat that bring him news and information, and maybe food. We don't really see that, but he offers what he's seen with his incredible eyes to Lee in exchange for food. So that was a nice bit, and like the way he gives a free sample by telling Lee some things in the form of a riddle, and then Lee has to work out that riddle. I thought it was a good way to show both the complexity of this animal culture that runs parallel to human culture, and also help Lee progress in his quest without just outright handing him something. So beyond that, there are some tense moments. Lee never comes face to face or nose to nose with the dog that killed his master in this book. I assume that's going to happen in a later book. But he does do a lot of different things that are adventurous and fun to see. Most notably, he's told by Lillian the Owl that he needs to, Lillian prefers live food, and he wants a Chinese takeout for in payment for his information. Lillian doesn't know what Chinese takeout is, but he heard it sounds really good. So he wants Chinese takeout, and he wants it alive. And so Lee has to go through a whole rigmarole to try and get live Chinese takeout, which I thought was really funny. That's why they were in a Chinese restaurant on that page I showed you earlier. So a very engaging story. It's the first half. We get all of the riddles and mysteries that were handed in this book, other than who, or at least why Lee's owner was killed, are answered in this book. So I don't know if the second half is going to be more of an adventure rescue kind of a story where Lee goes out and rescues the mate of his owner, or what. But a lot of the mystery pieces sorted out in this book. We see the dog that killed Lee's owner. We see the humans handling that dog. Of course, there could be someone that those humans work for. We don't know that. This seems to be a very high-tech crime, so there could be a corporation backing it. We don't know that stuff. But a lot of the mysteries that this book sets up are answered, and that makes it a pretty good self-contained story. But Lee hasn't actually gotten what he wants yet either, and the villains are still out there. So it's clearly a part one, and part two is going to be coming out hopefully sometime this year, maybe early next year. I forgot to check the campaign on that one, but I liked it. It's a very good story. As I said, it holds up well to scrutiny. There are some really standout characters. Most notably, Lee himself is well written. I really like the bit where he goes back and he talks to his family. I enjoyed Lily and the Owl a great deal. The villain dog looks like this and is very menacing. Has a high impact, even though he's not on the page very much. And all in all, it's a good story. It's a lot of fun to read. As a backup story, get Drunk Monkey, which was part of the Narwhal Shorts Compendium. I've already given my thoughts on that story in the review I did of the Shorts Compendium, so I'm not going to say a whole lot about it here, other than that it's a really fun action story about a drunk monkey that does kung fu squaring off against a kid who does kung fu. It has Narwhal's great sense of kinetic framing. He drew it himself and did it in grayscale. I think it looks really good. I think it's really fun. And it fits in with this book overall. So let's talk a little bit about this book overall. This is an all ages book. This is suitable, I would say, for kids definitely 12 and up. There are a couple shots of the murder scene that may not be appropriate for kids under that. I would say use your best judgment as parents. I think this would be really suitable for kids 10 and up. But, regular people can read this and enjoy it as well. I think it's a great book. I don't have any kids to give it to, but I'm definitely going to hold on to it because it's fun to read. It presents us really interesting characters. And it has a lot of heart to it, too, which is something that you don't always see in these indie comic projects. A lot of them, they'll have great action or they'll have really beautiful art and they'll tell an interesting story. But when you go looking for that strong emotional core, it's not always there. And I think Cerberus has that, the different ways it shows you Lee's relationship to his owner, to the other animals, and to his family, his mom and the cousins, I guess, or nieces and nephews, actually, that you see when he goes home and visits. So a very interesting story. It hits a wide market, and I really feel bad because this did not do quite as well, I think, as Narwhal's other campaigns have, and I think it really deserved to do a little bit better. And while I'm talking about that, not only is it a good story at a good price point, this came out at really with a short turnaround. We're used to seeing a 6-month turnaround, give or take, on your average indie comic. And I got this, I think, 2.5 to 3 months after the funding closed, which is really the window people aim for. So I think Narwhal has a really good handle on his supply lines. I think he has a great handle on his storytelling, starting to diversify, the people he works with. So this is a really great book showing how far Narwhal has come from his first project, which was Earthbound, that took a little while to get out after he crowdfunded it. All in all, very interesting story, lots of fun to read. Highly recommend it, regardless of the age of readers. I think anyone will enjoy the book. So let's talk a little bit. That's my recommendation. Let's get into the analysis. There are going to be spoilers in here. Narwhal does several things in here that I like. First of all, each of the main animals that we see has a sense that represents how they interact with the world, what their primary sensory input is. For the dogs, it's their ears. For this rat here, or mouse, it's the nose. Also, possum, it's the nose. The bat, it's the ears, obviously. And for the owl, it's the eyes. And each of these kind of give them a distinct role to fill in how they interact with the world. Lee has his ears, and he uses them to pick up what's going on around him right now. Sound is an immediate sensory input, or at least pretty immediate. Obviously, over very long distances, the speed of sound can lag a bit over what's happening here and now. But it is it's still pretty fast. It's still fairly instantaneous, especially over the distances that matter to, say, a dog. So it's a very fast sense. It lets him hear all around. It's one of your few 180-degree senses. So he's very much in touch with the world right now. Scent is your sense for what happened in the past tense. It is a 180-degree sense to a certain extent, but it's hard to get a direction off of scent alone unless there's a strong wind blowing. But scents linger, so you can get a lot of information about the past. That's pretty cool. Lillian the owl is kind of a forward-looking creature, even though he's very old, which I thought was an interesting twist. You would expect the old creature to be looking back on his life, but he's not. He's looking forward, and he's using his wisdom to anticipate people and events, which is nice. Owls, of course, in mythology are wise creatures, and then you give him this forward-looking sense, his ability to see things and anticipate how they're going to unfold. That's very powerful and very interesting. I think that's why Lillian had to be used very sparingly, which is unfortunate. I liked him. He was crotchety and grumpy, and he spoke in riddles, and it was kind of fun. But he dies in this story. And so let's talk a little bit about the various animal helpers. The rat is Lee's sidekick, for lack of a better term, and he helps Lee along with the forensic work because he can smell whether people have been there or not. Can't always identify people by smell because maybe he's never smelled them before, but it's a very interesting pairing with Lee's strong sense of hearing. Lee has a couple of other dogs he knows and is friends with. Samantha is another German Shepherd that is he's kind of sweet on. There's a hound dog that helps him keep in touch with the human investigation. So lots of interesting woodland creatures, but I like Lillian the most. And unfortunately, the villain shows up and burns his tree down. And since the owl is too old and fat to fly, he tries to make a run for it by branches, but he falls. And the villain gets him, which is a really nice moment because it lets us see the villain doing an evil deed on the page. It's very tastefully presented. Again, I don't think this is age inappropriate for anyone, but we see that this is a killer dog, and he is going to probably continue to do evil deeds in the future. So that's a nice moment, and it also cuts off Lillian as a resource because Lillian's ability to see so clearly what is happening and what will happen as a consequence of that, I think, is a little too powerful for Lee to have access to for the whole story. So he has to be cut off from it. So I think there's some really great story construction on display there. Last but not least, the interesting thing, the thing I really enjoyed about this, the implication that this creature is the Cerberus because it has like a camera rig on it. That's very interesting. So he's got 3 eyes. This is something that Lillian actually hints at during the riddle, and I think that may also be the origin of the name Cerberus for the series. Very interesting stuff. Lots to look at there, lots to think about, and it's well enough constructed that I am confident we're going to get very solid payoffs in the second half. All in all, a great story, one I recommend checking out. I think that if I were to make any recommendations for improvement on this, it would just be maybe to flesh out some more of the animal characters. We really only see the rat's family in this. I mean, it's great that we saw Lee go home, and this may be appropriate for the first book to just expand on Lee's family and his circumstances rather than try and do a whole lot for all the other animals. But in this book, the only other animal that really felt deeply developed was Lillian. Not that deeply developed. Of course, Lillian is dead now, too, so we can't really carry that investment forward into later parts of the story. So I'm really hoping to see some of these other characters developed so that we can come away from the story with a better sense of Lee's world and the kind of people that live in it and the kinds of things he's invested in. I guess people is the wrong word. Animals that live in it. So, yeah, a very good story. I recommend checking it out. Obviously, there will be a part 2 at some point, hopefully this year. And if you get a chance to back that Kickstarter and pick up the whole story, strongly recommend it, especially if you're looking for indie comics that you can show kids, whether it's aunts and uncles, nieces, or not aunts and uncles, nieces and nephews, or your own kids, or just put in a library at a school or a daycare where you work. I think these are really good comics that present an interesting story with great characters and no baggage that you will tend to get in a lot of mainstream stuff. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. There's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use those as you see fit. I'll talk to you later.